Now we will be discussing the miscellaneous transactions. So what are miscellaneous transactions? So these transactions are unique and not recurring in the ordinary course of operation of the government. This type of transaction seldom take place or ideally should not happen at all. To further discuss, I will be enumerating items that may be considered as miscellaneous transactions. So first is the loss of cash and property. This may be due to malversation, theft, robbery, or other causes. Second is the cash shortage. Third is cash overage. Fourth is dishonored checks. 5 concerns lost check. 6 spoiled checks. 7 stale checks. And 8 settlement of suspensions or disallowances or charges. As part of the general guidelines about cash shortages, it is stated that as soon as a shortage is definitely established, the auditor shall issue a memorandum to the punong barangay, attention to the city or municipal accountant who shall draw a journal entry voucher to take up the shortage. Shortage in the cash accountability of the accountable officer shall be recorded as a receivable from the accountable officer. With regards to the miscellaneous transactions that specifically concerns cash shortage, there may be a grant of relief from accountability that may be given to those who will request for it. So, the guidelines are, first, when a request for relief for shortages or loss of funds is granted, a copy of the decision shall be forwarded to the city or municipal accountant who shall draw a journal entry voucher to record the transaction recognizing the loss of assets and reversing the receivable from the accountable officer. Second, in case the request for relief is denied, immediate payment of the shortage shall be demanded from the accountable officer. Restitution shall be acknowledged by the issuance of an OR by the barangay treasurer. Last is, in the case the request for relief from accountability for loss of property caused by fire, theft, force majeure or other causes is granted, a copy of the decision shall likewise be forwarded to the city or municipal accountant for the preparation of the journal entry voucher. Let's proceed to the proforma entries of the miscellaneous transaction. First in line are the entries that concerns the cash shortages. So first, to record or to recognize the loss of cash or cash shortage, we must debit the account due from officers and employees, then credit cash in local treasury. On the other hand, to record the receipt of COA's decision granting relief of accountability to the barangay treasurer for the cash shortage, we must debit the account loss of asset, then credit the account due from officers and employees. Next is the entries for the receipt of payment for cash shortage due to COA's decision. In this transaction, we have to debit the account title cash in local treasury and we have to credit the account title due from officers and employees. Let's proceed to the entries with regards to the cash overage transaction. So, you must remember that in the case the cash examination disclosed cash overage as determined by the auditor, the amount shall be forfeited in favor of the government and an official receipt shall be issued by the barangay treasurer. So, to record this transaction, we will debit cash in local treasury and we will credit miscellaneous income. Now, let's discuss the transactions or the entries related to the dishonored check. A check is considered to be dishonored when upon its being duly presented for payment, such payment is refused or cannot be obtained. The general guidelines or policies concerning transactions such as dishonored checks are the following. So first, upon receipt of the debit memo and the dishonored checks from the bank, constructive cancellation of the copy of official receipt in his possession covering the dishonored check should be immediately effected by the barangay treasurer. The barangay treasurer shall immediately photocopy the dishonored checks and record as credit in the cash book cash in bank. The second one is that the barangay treasurer shall inform the payer of the dishonor of the check, the cancellation of the OR, and his liabilities under existing penal laws. The demand to effect immediate cash payment shall also be made. The barangay treasurer shall then inform the auditor who shall effect the cancellation and the duplicate copy of OR in case the same has already been submitted for audit. The third one states that the barangay treasurer shall forward the debit memo and the photocopy of the dishonored checks to the accountant. On the other hand, the accountant shall cancel the official receipt if it is still in his possession. He shall also prepare the journal entry voucher, taking up the dishonored checks by crediting cash in bank account and by debiting the appropriate income account. For further representations of the ones stated in the general policies or procedures, the record or the entry to record the receipt of bank debit memo and the original of the dishonored check, we must debit the income account, then credit cash in bank. Next is for the receipt of payment. So we have to debit cash in local treasury and we have to credit income account. The next miscellaneous transactions concerns the cancellation of lost check that was originally issued. So when do we consider a check to be lost? First, when it is misplaced. Second, when it is waylaid or left behind by the payee or holder in due course or by the custodian. Then third, when after a diligent search, it cannot be found or located. Then last, when it is lost due to fortuitous event, theft, or robbery. So the guidelines for this kind of transactions is that upon submission of sworn statement from the payee that a check is issued by the barangay is lost, the barangay treasurer shall immediately notify the bank concerned for the stoppage of payment and request for a certification for non-negotiation of the check. He shall also furnish a copy of the sworn statement and a copy of the bank certification to the punong barangay and the city or municipal accountant, who shall then prepare the journal entry voucher to cancel the payment made. Copy of the JEV shall be furnished by the barangay treasurer as basis for him to debit the amount in the cash book, cash in bank. In addition to that, the barangay treasurer shall also prepare a replacement check. So, the punong barangay shall prepare a punong barangay certification or PBC addressed to the bank with annotation that the same is a replacement for lost check. Spoiled checks. When do we consider a check to be spoiled? First, when it is torn. Second, when it is mutilated. Third, when it is defaced or with erasures or errors which affects the genuineness of any material information contained in the check. Such transactions or such checks shall be reported in the RAAF or the Report of Accountability for Accountable Forms. In a situation wherein a check spoiled in the course of preparation or in the hands of barangay treasurer, it may be replaced immediately by the cancellation of the spoiled check. On the other hand, if a check spoiled in the hands of the payee, it may be replaced upon return of the whole or at least 3/4 of the torn, mutilated, defaced, or with erasures or errors check to the barangay treasurer, who shall cancel the same. In such situation, the barangay treasurer is the one responsible to immediately notify the punong barangay and the city or municipal accountant of the check that is spoiled in the hands of the payee. The city or municipal accountant shall also make the necessary adjustments in the books. On the other hand, the punong barangay shall prepare the punong barangay certification for the replacement of the check. Next, we have staled checks. So, we considered a check to be staled when it has been outstanding for over 6 months from date of issue. At least 1 month before a check becomes stale, the barangay treasurer is responsible to send a written notice to the payee of the existence of the check. It shall then be reported in the RAAF. General guidelines on stale checks includes that when a check stalled in the hands of the barangay treasurer, it may be immediately replaced upon cancellation of the stale check. On the other hand, a check stalled in the hands of the payee may be replaced upon return of the check with a written request for its replacement. The barangay treasurer shall immediately notify the punong barangay and the city or municipal accountant of the check stalled in the hands of the payee. The city or municipal accountant shall make the necessary adjustments in the books. The punong barangay, just like with the spoiled check, shall also prepare the PBC or the punong barangay certification for the replacement check. For the illustrative accounting entries, let's first have the transactions wherein we would recognize or we would record the lost or the spoiled or the stalled check in our book. So first, we must debit cash and bank LCCA or local currency current account. Then we must credit accounts payable or the appropriate liability account that was previously debited. Next is for the transactions wherein we replace the lost or the spoiled or the stale check. In this kind of transaction, we have to debit the accounts payable or the appropriate liability account previously restored. Then we must credit cash and bank LCCA. The last miscellaneous transaction that a barangay may encounter are the suspensions, disallowances, and charges. So disallowances and charges shall be taken up in the books of accounts only when they become final and executory. They are considered to be final and executory upon the lapse of the period of appeal as evidenced by the issuance of the notice of finality of decision by the appropriate COA official. So now let's proceed to the pro forma entries for setting up of the disallowances or charges for transactions during the year. This kind of transaction, we have to debit receivables, disallowances or charges. Then we have to credit expense account and credit income account. The next naman is for the receipt of settlement of disallowances or charges. In this kind of transaction, our entry would be debit cash and local treasury and then credit receivables, disallowances or charges. Now, we will be discussing the fiscal responsibilities of the barangay officials that has been mentioned all throughout the video. First, let's have the punong barangay. So, the responsibility of the punong barangay includes the preparation of the annual executive and supplemental budgets of the barangay. The punong barangay also implements functions, project contracts, and activities to provide basic services and facilities to the barangay. Third, it is also the punong barangay's responsibility to negotiate, enter into, and sign contracts for and in behalf of the barangay upon the authorization of the sangguniang barangay. Next, it is also the responsibility of the punong barangay to approve claims relating to the disbursement of barangay funds, countersign checks and payments of the claims, prepare the PB certification for barangay check disbursement per COA circular. He or she is also responsible to sign the Statement of Management Responsibility over the financial statements. It is also his or her duty to ensure that all transaction documents and reports are submitted to the city or municipal accountant. Next, to keep complete records on the building and other structures of the barangay. He or she is also conduct physical count of supplies, investment property, plant and equipment, and biological assets. The punong barangay is also responsible to ensure that all the accounting documents and records are properly kept by concerned barangay officials and staffs. Last is that he or she shall inform the COA's auditor of the resignation, retirement, suspension of the barangay officials, including the change of barangay treasurer so that the latter could be subjected to audit. The next barangay official is the barangay treasurer. The barangay treasurer has three major roles or responsibilities. So first, let's tackle the responsibilities or the duties of the barangay treasurer as to collections. So for the collections, the barangay treasurer keeps custody of barangay funds and property and ensure the safety of cash items, and barangay records. The barangay treasurer also collects all taxes, fees, and other charges due and contributions accruing to the barangay and deposit the same with authorized depository bank. The barangay treasurer also collects for the city or municipal treasurer when deputized and remits all collections intact. Last, for the collections, the barangay treasurer also renders report on collections and deposits made. Next is for the disbursement. The barangay treasurer is the one responsible to certify to the availability of cash for the disbursement vouchers or payroll presented. The barangay treasurer also issues and signs checks for payments of obligations. The barangay treasurer is also responsible to render the reports on checks, cash, and PCF disbursement. Last, for the disbursement, it is the responsibility of the barangay treasurer to maintain the cash book to record the in and out of the cash in the treasury, in the depository bank, and petty cash. Last is the barangay treasurer's responsibility with regards to the supplies and materials and property of the barangay. So, the barangay treasurer keeps the records of supplies and materials and property of barangay. Second, he or she prepares the ICS for the issuance of small items with serviceable life of more than 1 year, and PAR for the issuance of property and equipment to end users. Last, the barangay treasurer assists the punong barangay in the conduct of physical count of property.
When does accountability start and end for all barangay officials? Accountability starts upon their assumption to office and ends only after their term expires. Is there a time frame for COA to audit barangay books of accounts? None. COA is mandated to conduct an audit annually or as often as necessary and make a report thereon to the Sangguniang Bayan/Panlungsod as the case may be. Can prior year's expenditure be charged against the current fiscal year's budget? No. Expenditures are supposed to be obligated and liquidated in the same year they are incurred.
Can the barangay use its funds for the acquisition of a lot for a barangay hall? Yes, if there are enough funds for the purpose. However, since barangay funds, particularly in the fourth-class LGUs and below, is scarce and limited, what are common errors committed in barangay fiscal administration? Barangay officials should guard themselves against committing the following common errors in fiscal administration. Failure to fully implement livelihood projects for the year. Non-preparation and submission of accountability reports for accountable forms. Maintaining more than one depository account contrary to the barangay accounting manual. Failure to register in the